Hello and welcome everybody to our LinkedIn Live, also restreaming on Facebook and YouTube across both Bailey and French and Kahuna channels today. So good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everyone joining us across the world. I believe we've got a truly global audience joining us today for a fantastic conversation about skills-based strategies. And I am delighted to be here with my partner, Jai Shah, the CEO and co-founder of Kahuna. Jai, how are you doing this morning?
I'm great, Alex. Thanks for hosting this and being a moderator today. Really excited for the conversation.
Yes, me too. We have so much in common. Our organizations do completely different things, but a really great opportunity to talk about something that is the hottest topic at the moment in organizations for 2024. There is so much need for people to find simplicity in the complexity that's taking place across all organizations. So we're going to jump into a really fantastic conversation about skills-based strategies for companies, for organizations, and for our people. But it would be lovely to hear from everybody who's joining us here today. So we have a comment section. Please do say hello in the comments. Reach out, let us know where you're dialing in from. As I said, I think there's people from right the way across the world joining us today. I believe we have close to 1,000 registered. It would be great to hear where you're located. And also would love to hear your questions, thoughts, and comments throughout our conversation. We would love to keep it really open and interactive. So keep them coming. So let's kick off, Jai. I'm really keen to know a little bit more, I guess, talking a bit of a high level about skills. So skills-based organizations, it is absolutely a big headline for this year. I know it's been creeping in post-pandemic whilst people are looking for simplicity. What's going on? Why is skills-based organizations the big buzzword in your mind?
Well, in my mind, it starts with the rate of change that's happening to our workforce, and in particular, technology areas, vertically aligned changes. So, just to give a little bit of context of our perspective, we generally work with organizations with a lot of frontline workforces. So, in energy, manufacturing, healthcare, and the thing that's all those verticals have in common is that the rate of change that's occurring and the impact on the workforce is tremendous. In energy, we're being asked to operate in more technical environments, or we're being asked to transition from traditional energy companies into digital service companies, or digital oil field companies, transition to renewable energies, for instance. So all these kind of macro trends that are impacting the workforce, really, the dependence on the workforce skills and the ability to meet that moment is causing, I think, all these organizations to really sit back and say, I I don't have a great handle on where my capabilities are today. So how am I really going to measure progress towards that future, and be able to meet the moment with my workforce? And that's true across all of the organizations that we work with, and that's driving the conversation, Alex.
Yeah, and I'm really with you on that rapid pace of change piece. It feels like, and I'm being told completely by many of my C-suite contacts and clients, is, the amount and turbulence of the change that's approaching us and that we're going through this year is huge. And kind of post-pandemic, almost we thought that there was a lot of change going on, and obviously, there was and there has. But this year seems like the year where organizations are kind of getting their house in order. They're kind of getting things straight. For not only the changes that are happening already and approaching us even quicker around AI and tech, but also I think with the changes potentially in some of the largest political spheres. I won't get into that, but we are looking at two major elections with the US and the UK that are potentially going to change an awful lot of our social environment and how organizations are interacting, collaborating, the opportunities that are there on a global platform. What is going to be hitting us next? And it feels like there's this urgency to get things sorted at a time when actually people are still trying to work out where their organization is at post-pandemic, with all the changes and pivots that people made to kind of stay at the forefront of their competition. So really feeling that rapid pace of change, creating the urgency to focus on skills and getting it right. But I also feel like there is something new happening as well with leaders and managers of some of those frontline populations, those workforces that are huge and that do have kind of complex tasks and changing technology and equipment around them. So those skills need to change quickly. Is how do people really manage and exactly that, identify capability that sits within their organization to be able to deploy teams or projects into urgent requirements as they arise. And I think that's really where we're looking at managers and leaders and saying, you know, kind of pull your A team together for this one. And they're going, well, you know, not quite sure. I've got some new people here. They're inducting. They're great. They've got some new skills to the organization, but I'm not really sure what motivates them to perform. You know, how am I going to get people collaborating well together across different locations, different environments? And the need for simplicity for me is just such a strong piece. You know, I'm getting people saying, you know, I don't want a big competency framework. Don't make me work out, you know, what I have to do. Just tell me what I have to do. I don't know. Do you hear that from your managers and leaders in the clients that you work with?
We do, but I think, you know, there's a lot in what you just said, and I think it starts with, you know, why are we gathering skills data? You know, what is the end game? And that is where this whole journey starts. And to your point of around simplicity, that will guide you to whether you need that massive competency framework or you just need a very specific skills taxonomy around a process and an you know, kind of in an operating environment. So the challenge for a lot of organizations is to not try to boil the ocean with these initiatives and really anchor these initiatives around true outcomes. So what am I trying to enable? And one use case that you just mentioned that I think is very prevalent now is simply identifying talent that can respond to dynamic work. Work is changing. You know, take manufacturing, for instance. You know, the way manufacturing facilities and organizations operate today is different than it was 20, 30 years ago. It is often based on demand and very dynamic. So how can I make my workforce meet that moment and be as dynamic as the demands on the workforce? Without a roadmap of, you know, very specific skills that are required to do that work, you know, that's very difficult. But that's where you start in that organization. If that's the end game, that's where you have to start versus maybe starting at a very high level around knowledge workers or your engineering workforce. Go tackle that frontline workforce challenge. So we do. I think organizations right now, the challenge is the broad topic of skills is very, you know, kind of elusive. There's a lot there and a lot of different ways to go tackle this problem around transitioning to a skills-based organization. For us, that all starts with identifying why would you do that? What are you hoping to gain? And then anchor your strategies around those goals.
And that's it, isn't it? Is that outcome focus? I have a concern around it. I think it's right, but I have a concern around the outcome focus being so organizationally driven. And I think, you know, there is a real kind of tension with people first organizations where we are actually, and Jeffrey mentioned here, you know, there's a loss of tribal knowledge where there's huge turnover in some organizations. You know, people want to feel like they're being invested in for them. And this people first strategy and human first approach being that, you know, yes, the organization likes all these skills and they need these skills for the future. What's in it for me? Where's my career going? How am I going to be able to steer myself in a way where basically I can move up and earn more money? Because, you know, there's pensions, there's issues, there's, you know, there's not enough, you know, for people to feel that they've got skin in the game to do that. And it does feel like skills-based organizations, even in that title, it's very focused on the business needs. And I think there's this tension and there's this balance around workforce where people really want to hear what's in it for me. Where am I gonna get these skills from? Am I going to learn them from other people who've been here a bit longer than me with great experience and expertise, or do I need to go and retrain somewhere? And how is that going to support my career? I think that's a really big issue that has to go hand in hand with this whole kind of shift.
Absolutely. I think there are two sides to this coin. There's the organization perspective, and then there's the worker or employee perspective. And there's absolutely no doubt that uh, you've got to incorporate the what's in it for me. And we're seeing that actually come to life in things like pay for skills programs, where the organization can now prioritize what's important, what's going to move the needle for the organization, and therefore expose those opportunities for development down to the worker level and ensure that the worker is working on the right skills. They're not, developing something that's going to be antiquated in 2 or 3 years or whatever. And then building trust with instant reward when you do meet those milestones and you uh, kind of achieve that skill proficiency, automatically increasing pay, for instance. Healthcare is very innovative around this in nursing, for instance. They've got this concept of a clinical ladder. And in a clinical ladder, when you've met very specific milestones of competency achievement, you are automatically granted a pay increase. And I think that that becomes really powerful in building trust that if I do my part, I'm going to be rewarded. And the organization's actually prioritizing those things on an annual basis. This is what we want you to focus on for the coming year. And I think that two-way transparency is super, super powerful in engaging people in this journey. The last point I'll make around that is, with the new generation of workers, they want that direction. They want to know, how do I lean in, engage, and then if I do, I want to be rewarded kind of instantly. We're in that instant gratification uh, kind of generation now, and it's fair. If I hit that milestone, I should see the results. And I think building that trust is very important.
Yeah, it is important, and in some cases it's possible, and in others it's not, is it? Some organisations are future projecting and trying to build skills for a greater success, and actually aren't able to give that instant gratification. So there's got to be that passion, that desire, almost like that. And I think this probably just comes back to managers and leaders again. And Romain was saying here, employees need to be aware of those opportunities to develop those skills, because actually our managers and leaders are the ones that bring it to life. All the best kind of architecture and processes and systems can be introduced into organizations, but unless the leaders and managers are actually working with people to understand and translate what that means, how that translates into career pathways, how that turns into opportunities for people to progress and get the rewards and the recognition for doing so, it's always going to be our leaders and managers, the arms into the organization, to really understand that. And I think that always comes back to me around that simplicity, because I see managers all the time, particularly kind of middle managers in organizations, trying to translate complex strategy into project-based daily ways of working. And they're constantly overloaded. They're the ones that are the most burnt out. They have the most responsibility for everything on their shoulders, big teams, big departments, and really just looking for what's the simple way to get to the outcomes we need to get to here. Surely it doesn't have to be that overcomplicated. And I think that's what I'm seeing post-pandemic, is almost like a new wave of manager demand that's saying, look, HR, people, functions, please don't give me, this entire workbook to work through. Don't give me a 10-step process. Think about me as a customer. And I think that's really where I like to kind of think about, the manager and the leader as the customer, the most important kind of people in the organization, stringing everything together and connecting the dots and helping people bring this to life.
Well, I think you hit it right on the head. I mean, in terms of, so in past, kind of approaches, I think we saw a lot of skills or competencies, and it wasn't even really skills. It was more kind of this heavier weight object of a competency, but it was woven into processes that weren't designed to manage the competency development. They were managing performance or managing a career conversation. And the competency was just kind of a referential object that people discussed in that journey. Now, we're seeing business process evolve around managing skills,
Mm,
which then will lend to, technology and process and, workflows and things like that, which incorporate the management of skills in a more simplistic way that's geared towards the people who are engaging with that content. And that becomes super important, is to understand that this is a process unto itself. And then it's got tangential relationships to learning, to career development, to compensation.
mm,
So the way we think about that is people adopting these processes along a maturity curve, starting with identifying and maybe assessing a baseline, and then progressing to incorporating that baseline measurement into talent processes, compensation processes, learning processes, and ultimately for us into operational processes like scheduling the workforce or deploying the workforce in very dynamic ways. And I think that if you recognize that there's an adoption or maturity curve, it can be more simplistic in the beginning when you're just getting your arms around things, and then you can very intentionally incorporate all of that data into your downstream processes. If you
mm.
try to figure out that whole chain from the very beginning, though, and think you're going to solve it all at once, it's very difficult.
Yeah, and I see that happening. And I think the idea of that maturity model does almost just, it gives that breathing room, that acceptance of we are where we are, and this is a journey to move forwards. And I think, there is there's a kind of there's a piece around demystifying the competencies that managers and leaders have been trying to understand for so long. Certainly, I grew up in an HR world where competencies, behaviors, capabilities were, all interchangeably meant the same thing, which was kind of just grow and develop. But it wasn't defined enough in a way that people actually knew how to go and do that.
That's
So
right.
managers didn't know the complexity of almost taking apart a competency. What bit of that is knowledge? What bit of that is kind of repetitive practice? What bit of that is actually failing and trying again? And it's that kind of development of skills that I like, with moving towards more of a skills-based organization, and kind of to a certain extent doing away with the terminology that's confusing people around competencies and capabilities. I mean, how do you develop those? It's really, subjective. It's up to someone's independent understanding to know what that might mean, and that doesn't help new people into organizations. It's that being able to have that simple outcome focus and that taxonomy of skills that can be learnt and build on knowledge stores that are already independently, and open access for people to go and find themselves, and then also to be able to then build that together with what people care about and their strengths. And obviously most people who know me know I talk a lot about human strengths being almost like the bit that unlocks the motivation and the performance. We can have all the knowledge and the skills in the world, but that doesn't mean we love to do them. Our strengths are those things that we really naturally, use to navigate our world around us, and that's what brings all of that to life in our performance. So really making sure that we've got those kind of building blocks in place is critical, so that people can use their strengths in an effective way and actually achieve great performance and promotion and opportunities to progress. And Romain mentioned there as well about managers being able to progress too. Absolutely, people want to be able to see the opportunities that are arising throughout the organization, and not just moving through kind of bands within one role kind of description. There needs to be more of that flexibility. We're expecting people to be psychologically flexible all the time, to bend with the organization and the context and the environment that we're working within. And we're looking for the same, aren't we? That transactional piece from our organizations of flex with me, help me understand how I can move in this organization and what opportunities are open. So I love this conversation. The time is flying so quickly, Jai. I'm really excited and animated. But the one thing I really wanted to talk to you about, there's a few things here, but is really thinking about the pitfalls of moving to a skills approach. So obviously we've both been talking to and working with a lot of organizations, which is why I'm hoping these insights are helpful today for this broad audience, because we work across different industries. So we see the common challenges and issues that managers and leaders face, but organizations in general. But when organizations start to think about moving to that skills approach, you've mentioned the maturity curve and kind of accepting where you are and thinking about that journey. What are the other kind of common pitfalls? What are the things that can go wrong that kind of get in the way of moving towards a skills approach from your perspective and your experience?
Well, I think a few things. One, again, trying to boil the ocean from the start. I think, and we discussed that. I think pretty well. I think the other pitfall that we see a lot is not understanding that different types of skills may have different uh, kind of processes around how they're validated, or if they even need to be validated, how they're collected and curated and managed. So not every skill is the same. And again, that comes back to the outcomes that you're trying to achieve with this assessment and proficiency determination, and then how you're going to incorporate that data into your other processes downstream. And again, I think if you want to engage people and participate in this process, you have to provide them with tools, with processes that really make it easy for them to lean in and engage in that. And if you provide a tool or a process that just doesn't match the skill or competency that is trying to be, assessed, people are going to disengage, and it's not going to be, a pleasant experience. So that's, flexibility in your models and how you think about these skills and curating them and assessing them is important. And then the last thing I would say is not having the clear kind of objectives defined, which drive the prioritization of what you're trying to do actually. And what I mean by that is really focusing on areas of the business that want to lean in, that are going to be early champions and kind of are ready to engage in this process. And it's not something that's forced down or top down driven, and kind of dictated to the organization. So, for us, that means a really tight collaboration between HR and operations in these initiatives versus just HR coming up with a theoretical kind of model and pushing that on the organization. I think that becomes problematic.
Yeah, and I think that we're seeing that across organizations in other areas as well, aren't we? That kind of that need for collaboration across departments. And obviously some large organizations have HR operations departments as
Yeah.
well, which makes it easier when there's kind of that structural focus in on bringing those things together. But yeah, very difficult in organizations, particularly global organizations where people are dispersed and teams are spread out in a matrix, to get the people together to be able to focus at the same time. Because what I'm also seeing in large global organizations is that strategies are much more independent to the different regions than ever before. I feel like previously it's all been very global, but there's been a bit of a deglobalizing going on where people actually have more freedom and empowered to have a different strategy. And so then if you're trying to coordinate across HR and ops globally, in an organization that has different strategic priorities that actually change the need for this, it's about really trying to find the opportunity for the strengths-based organization approach to impact those different strategies, which again makes it's a harder work, isn't it? Absolutely, collaboration is key. Romain, I'm with you on that one 100%.
I think just a last point on that, Alex. I think HR has traditionally also been bound, unfortunately, by some concepts and frameworks that are difficult to kind of enable in a skills-based organization. What I mean by that is, like, if you think about the global job catalog or job framework, job architecture that most organizations spend a lot of time developing, and for very good reason, tried to really shrink that down to be more manageable from a compensation and normalization perspective across a global operation. That is in direct contrast often to getting in a skills-based organization where you need to be very specific about the role and the work that's being done and align that to a specific skills profile. And now I'm anchored with this job catalog that's very broad and kind of global in nature, and I'm trying to do this very specific skills initiative, tie it to my job architecture. Those are the things that have, I think, when HR doesn't necessarily collaborate with operations, can get it wrong. And that's where the conversation, I think, is evolving and becoming more interesting. I see much more collaboration these days that's driving really interesting strategies around that kind of move or transition from jobs to skills, for instance.
Yeah. And it's still very early on, isn't it? I'm still waiting to see a few organizations come out and sharing their success kind of case stories
Yeah.
around the biggest shift. And I'm interested to see what their angle will be. I know there's some organizations that are using kind of skills-based organizations to actually move to more of a task-based organization overall rather than teams. And it feels so wrong to me. People like jobs. People like to have a team. People like to be part of something. It's an absolute fundamental human nature. And yes, there's a whole gig economy where people have portfolio roles. I understand that completely. But in the real fabric of the large parts of most organizations, to switch to a task focus to me just feels so transactional and missing out all of those human elements. I think there's a large part here that's about how do we weave this in with so many priorities in organizations. And when if you just come down to it, like we as humans, we're all overloaded. Everyone I speak to is maxed out. They've got more emails they can read. They've got more texts and messages on WhatsApp than ever before. They're missing stuff left, right, and center and just managing to kind of spin the plates of the urgent pieces. And then being asked to do more. I'm seeing more restructures and reorgs at the moment. We're seeing a lot of people losing roles and being laid off. And that's stretching an already stretched workforce. We know that, post-pandemic, there wasn't a lot of room to cut. And now cuts are really hurting organizations where actually we're losing functions, we're losing abilities and trying to collapse things together. How do we get people's attention and focus to switch to something new in an environment where everything is just, absolutely crazy mad? And that really worries me, actually, because as a psychologist, people only have so much cognitive ability in a day. That's why we have form habits, because habits make it easier for us to continue to repeat things over and over without giving too much cognitive energy to it. But when every single thing is new, it's more cognitive energy for us, and it's exhausting. And if you don't get enough recovery time from that, then you can really struggle to apply it into performance. My worry with some of this is taking that skills-based approach and almost, if it's overloading people, that even if it could be successful, it won't be, because we're burning people out in the process. So, finding those foundations, those mechanisms, the processes and ways to help bring people through that maturity curve, I think is going to be so critical.
I agree. But AI is going to solve all those problems around productivity but no, but if you take our healthcare vertical, for instance, and kind of community nursing burnout, obviously during the pandemic was huge. That whole concept of being asked to do more with less, it obviously it just taxed that workforce to the breaking point. And what we're seeing actually is the move to a skills-based approach is in response to that in many ways, because what we can do now is ensure that the right work is being assigned to the right people, the people who are most capable of handling that work. And kind of there's this concept again in nursing of performing to the highest level of your kind of licensure or your proficiency. And the acuity of the patient demand should match up with the proficiency of the nursing staff that you're kind of assigning to that work. None of that's possible if you haven't identified the skills and competencies that align to that kind of model, right? So, I think this is all in response. We're seeing a move actually to kind of try and relieve some of the stress and over or the stress, the inherent stress of being assigned to work that you're not capable of performing. That's another thing that becomes extremely stressful, and it leads to a lot of turnover. In manufacturing, in healthcare, et cetera. So I think this can actually be something that does alleviate some of those things longer term. The challenge is in the short term, right? Is who's there to wrap their arms around curating all this skills content and developing it, et cetera. So yeah.
And it's giving people the opportunity also to recognize where they may be doing lower level work than they're capable of. So not just the stress of having to step up, but also when you're in a role where you're actually not being used to your full potential, and maybe micromanaged, or not having enough freedom to really innovate, to expand. And I think that pulls into one of Brian's questions around fostering a culture of continuous learning. There is appetite for learning. People do see it now as a connection to career pathway and opportunity and growth. And really, I guess I'm really interested in how we bring that back into our human passion for growth, not just financial gains or promotions, but really thinking about ourselves as human beings, as a species. We have a tendency towards growth, like every other living being does, and that has to play into wanting to learn and grow, but feeling safe to do so, and feeling okay to make mistakes, and feeling okay to kind of go again, and to practice in an environment with peers who face the same challenges. That's a really difficult thing when you're trying out new skills and there's no one around you to kind of look sideways and go, gosh, am I doing this right? I don't even know. And just reading something or copying something from an online piece is super hard. It's that ability to be with others again that brings it back to the human experience that we all crave and we all need, whether we know it or not, consciously or subconsciously. It's really important to be able to recognize our human aspect of this. And I think someone mentioned in the comments earlier about the soft skills that are as important. And I'm very interested in the different types of skills that are coming up, technical skills, digital skills, leadership skills. And I call a lot of these the human skills, not necessarily soft skills, but the human skills. What is it that differentiates us as humans from the expensive AI? Absolutely, Edgar, it is expensive. What differentiates us, and how can we go and do that on purpose? And that's really helpful. I think Dermot's talking there about using the data from the skills-based approach. Absolutely, we haven't talked about the power of the data necessarily, but it is really powerful, isn't it, to be able to see the trends, the patterns in data that give us insights to know what people are interested in, which direction the organization needs to go in, how do things overlap, where is there a connection and opportunity. I don't know what you think about that opportunity to kind of see and use data.
I think for a couple things that you mentioned in terms of the human aspect of this, I think, and the culture of continuous learning and that crave to, kind of always be learning. I think connecting the skills journey with the learning journey and understanding the relationships between all this content that's being surfaced and pushed out, and which content I should engage with and how it's going to kind of benefit my personal growth or professional growth. I think that's a really important outcome and a very good use case for the data out of skills. Kind of that is an aspect that I think we have lost in many ways, or have not fully explored the potential there. When we think that people are consuming content and really understanding how it's applicable to their growth in a particular role or job or capability. And I don't know that that's always true. And I think they need that guide. We need to provide the overlap, the kind of tie and integration between those things. And I do think you're right that what kind of happens naturally is people start to separate, and those that are super interested in taking accountability and ownership for their development and have that desire are going to lean in very hard and take advantage of that in a way that really becomes powerful to that continuous learning kind of mindset. So I think that's one area that I would love to see us explore more.
I'd love that too, to really understand like what are the implications of looking through and seeing those connections. There's so much coming up from this. I think the AI piece is really interesting, and I'm really keen to make sure that there's an AI conversation in every topical conversation I'm having at the moment, because it pops up everywhere. And there's there's this opportunity where we're asking everyone to kind of embrace AI where it's possible to. And at the same time, there's confusion around trying to have this culture of learning and growth and experience and being excited and kind of to use new technology. And yet it comes up at the same kind of level as watch out, don't click on anything, because there's a cyber risk here. And I think that's really interesting, because even this morning, there's a little try new experience button on my platform this morning, and I'm desperate to click the button. I'm a real clicker, but I know that I have to be really careful that I'm not clicking on something that's going to damage my whole PC and my setup. And it's like we're living and trying to navigate this world where there's this kind of high level of risk and requirement for rules and compliance. I know that's really huge in the oil and energy and manufacturing and engineering. People really need to be able to understand what is okay and what isn't okay for the critical kind of safety outcomes. And yet at the same time, we're saying, go explore, be innovative, be creative, learn these new fantastic skills, show your emotional intelligence for being, open to these new pieces. How do we help people embrace a culture of learning new skills in an environment that's so constrained?
That's a great question. I don't have the answer here. I think that it's such an emerging, like AI is a perfect example of why a skills-based strategy is needed, right? I mean, just take that one concept alone. It's permeating. It's changing every job. Across virtually every task will have is at least presumably could have an AI component for the most part. And so understanding how I need to change as an individual to best take advantage of this thing, that's the promise of this thing that's out there, without running afoul of all the policies and procedures and rules that exist within my organization. That's a almost an impossible challenge. And it's exactly why when we do figure out how best to use this technology, it would be great to be able to cascade that knowledge and development at an individual role level to understand how best each individual can kind of take advantage of what that opportunity really is. You can't do that in our traditional kind of learning environment. It just doesn't work, right? You need to have a dynamic, skills based but way of exposing that, way of communicating that, way of tying the learning journey to the development of those skills, and then incenting people to actually lean in and learn those skills and take advantage of that opportunity. It's the perfect use case for why, and it fits that model of introducing a lot of change at a very rapid pace and trying to kind of make sense of all of that. So that microcosm of AI is, I think, the perfect justification for moving to a skills based,
Yeah,
at least mindset.
I agree, and I really like it, because I feel like there is this just kind of foundation required of simplicity, of visibility, actually, for so many different parts of the people experience in a working place. Um, but also it gives that safety and security of what it comes back down to. So it's almost like the AI is the add to that. And I could be wrong. The AI could be part of the foundation in the future, but I'm thinking, that at the moment, what I see is a hesitation. I see
Yep.
almost this huge existential, massive thing that's approaching us, and people are almost like it's so big you can't see how to start. So how do we even start? And for me, it feels like there's a skills-based organizational approach that lays that foundation for people to be able to think about, okay, so what would digital skills look like in this scenario? Or maybe a layer or a lens across different areas of skills. In the same way, human skills, I often see kind of skills in columns, but I see them, across as well. And it's kind of, how do we make sense of the world around us in the best way so that we can move dynamically and flexibly forward? There's this pull, as I said before, for organizations to be really flexible and to really request and want psychological flexibility from people to be part of what's coming and not knowing what that is and being able to adapt and shift. I think we've moved on from agility. Agility feels quite static now. It's like this psychological flexibility to be able to try new paths and come back down again, and take people with you and feel like it's okay to try and to fail and to move forward, so that you've got those pioneers constantly reaching out, trying new areas. But unless you've got a solid foundation to come back to, I think that's really super hard. So, that's one of the reasons I really like this kind of skills approach, because for me, it simplifies the complexity of the kind of the competence, capability, behaviors, values, kind of frameworks that still sit in organizations. And I look at them and they're very pretty models on PowerPoints, but I'm like, how am I supposed to use that as a manager? I don't know what that means to me when I'm, in a warehouse doing something specific and I'm not even attached to a PC. What does it mean? And bringing that to life in the most human way is the most important thing. So I'm loving some of these questions and comments coming through. We've got about 5 minutes left. So if you've got any burning questions, please ask them now. We'll certainly come through and answer any of the ones we don't get to afterwards.
I think Jeffrey asked an interesting question around ROI and how to justify, how to even start this. I think, at a very macro level, the question is, without taking a skills-based approach, how can you be sure that your workforce will align to the change that's happening in your industry? Are you going to be able to meet? And I appreciate, Alex, that this is more of the top line, bottom line. Are we going to meet the moment from an economic standpoint? But really, honestly, if you don't understand where you are today, what's needed in the future, and kind of map out a really planned, proactive roadmap around building that capability, that to me is the question is, what happens if you don't adopt this skills-based approach? And there will be new tools and technology involved, but I think it becomes very, very important to being able to have that confidence in being able to meet whatever your overall business strategy is and how it's changing.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. And I love Dermot's just said it, that you can create heat maps then for workforce planning for into tomorrow. Absolutely. That challenger mindset of what happens if we don't do this is so critical, because absolutely, what's the possibility for adding new to something that isn't necessarily got the stable foundation.
Right.
And in large organizations, that costs money every single day. And we have to think about the bottom line when it comes to this too, because that's going to be driving the opportunity to invest 100% and tying it into the people experience as much as possible, so that it's seen as something that people really need and want to engage with, rather than something that the organization is doing for its own benefit. So I'm really I've really enjoyed this conversation. So many different angles on the skills-based organization. We have a giveaway for a document from our last skills-based conversation. I think there's a QR code floating around. Yes, here it is. If anyone wants to have a look at some of our previous content on skills, we are very open to talking to people about their organization's approach from both Kahuna and Bailey & French perspective. So you certainly have our details. Please do get in touch directly or through the organizations. We've been talking about skills-based organizations. We've talked about career pathways. We've talked about different aspects of maturity curves. We've covered organizational and human perspectives, different types of skills, thinking about frameworks and how to clarify and simplify approaches. We've talked about pitfalls of moving to a skills-based approach. We've covered an awful lot in 45 minutes, Jai. I think we've nailed this one. I'm happy here. So I am really delighted to have had this conversation with you. It seems to have gone by in just seconds. I'm so engaged and enthused. And yeah, really, really lovely to partner with you and your team on this wonderful event. I hope everyone who's joined us has felt some added value and benefit from this, and enjoyed being part of the conversation, please do feel free to carry on chatting in the comments. It will still remain live, and you can share this link with anyone else in your organisation or your friends and colleagues elsewhere, who perhaps maybe are asleep at the moment on the other side of the world. So please do share really broadly. If there's any other questions that you have, come back to us. Otherwise, I will say to Jai, thank you so much. I hope you've enjoyed it.
Yeah, thank you, Alex, and thanks for such an informed perspective. Really appreciate the conversation.
Very much so. I've enjoyed it. So I'm going to end the stream now. We've been live today on YouTube, Facebook, multiple LinkedIn accounts partnering across different live streams. So I'm really excited to see how far and wide we can share this one. An important conversation for organisations in a year of quite a lot of turbulence. So let's see where it goes. I'd love to conclude this later on in the year with you, Jai, and have a bit of a follow-up conversation based on where our predictions have laid. Thank you, everybody. I'm going to close the stream now. I look forward to engaging with you further, and thank you to both teams for all your support.